I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 93. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode. It is mid-May 2021. So we are halfway through Q2, and I want to encourage each of you as listeners to lift your head and just see how it's going. How's the quarter going for you so far? Are you on track with the things that you wanted to accomplish? If you don't know the answer to that, this is a really good time to push the reset button, get reorganized, and figure out how you want to finish the quarter and finish it really strong. If you do feel like you're on track, awesome. Give yourself a pat on the back and a high five. Keep going, because if you're on track and you have your finger on the pulse of things, that means this quarter was going to be a quarter well spent where you were really focused forward on the right things. And yeah, good for you. Now, if you aren't, this is not a reason to beat yourself up. There's no upside in that at all. It's just a good time I want this to serve as a reminder to be like, oh, okay. No, yeah, I have 6 weeks left in the quarter. How do I want this to go? What do I want to have accomplished by the end of the quarter? And constrain down. You'll really surprise yourself when you narrow down just to figure out, like, what can I do by the end of the quarter? And do not list 3 to 5 things. Pick one thing that you really want to get done by the end of the quarter and go for it. And find a way, schedule it into your week using Monday Map, the whole scheduling process I have. So just make sure you are being very conscious and awake that we are midway through the quarter. And if you're pleased, good job, keep going. And if something needs to shift, whether it's work-wise or if it needs to shift for your personal life, take stock. This is a really good chance to figure out how you want to finish Q2 strong in whatever way that means for you. If there's an imbalance somewhere and you want to bring a bit more balance between personal and professional life, make it so. Get your ducks lined up so that you finish in a way that feels really good. Because remember, you can accomplish so much, but it can't be at the cost of you. And that doesn't mean you should set your bar low. It just means you're going to have to be really thoughtful and think harder and get creative about how to reach the result you want, this awesome result that's really going to stretch you and not at the cost of you. That is possible. You just have to have a look at it. All right. Well, that's my mid-quarter check-in with y'all. Also, last week, I taught a class called How to Focus on What Matters Most for Your Law Firm. And the participation was awesome. What I learned was that so we go over a few myths that I bust, basically, that are so easy for law firm owners to buy into. We bust those. And what I learned in that was that people were really engaged in telling me what myths they bought into more than others. So we got to dig in on one of those. I also gave a framework that I use literally with every single client. It doesn't matter if they are a private client. It doesn't matter if they are in Mastery Group, my group coaching program. It doesn't matter. And actually, even sprints, we do the same framework. There is a framework that I use, and I have learned over the years to just trust the freaking framework because it works. And I share that in the class. And the participation was amazing. If it's something that you're remotely interested in, I highly recommend that you go watch it. If you go to velocitywork.com and you hit the free masterclass button, it is there for you to get the on-demand version. We will also put it in the show notes. But I just want to make sure you all know that if you missed the first one, you can now have the on-demand version, and it's worth your time. It's worth watching. It is the things that it's so easy to get caught up in so many things that we can be focused on for growth, but it really boils down to a framework. So I highly encourage you to check that out. Get yourself boosted for mid Q2, and the information is something that you should be thinking about for yourself 100%. I highly recommend checking that out. Okay, well, today's episode is short and sweet. I wanted to share with you something that I've been practicing more and more, and it's just been making such a difference. So the concept I want to share with you today is making requests and making promises. When you set a goal and you are working towards it, when you are aiming for something very specific, it is your job to keep conversation alive around that goal. Because if you don't, that's when life easily kind of takes over and pulls you back or into default mode or back into the business more than on the business, where you don't actually work and you're not focused on the goal. You're just focused in the work. So there's all kinds of things that you can do to keep yourself on track. Having a plan, right? And honoring that plan is of utmost importance, but keeping the conversation alive can streamline you towards where you want to go. It can help you bridge the gap from where you are now to where you want to be so much faster if you keep the conversation alive. I think that's why private clients that I work with, and now mastery group members, I get to do this with them. Every quarter, we set a plan. We have touch points through the quarter for execution, accountability, and then we have the next quarterly meeting. One major thing that comes out of this that we don't talk about a whole lot as being a thing, but it is a thing, is that the conversation stays alive towards where they're wanting to go, where they named that they want to go. And that is powerful. That is one of the perks of having a coach, is that the conversation stays alive towards where you want to go. Well, one way that you can really tailor in your own world, tailor and make sure that the conversation stays alive, is to focus on making lots of requests and making promises. If you start thinking in that way, where like, how can I make this a request or a promise? You realize how much faster you line yourself up with action. I teach this stuff, and sometimes I'll find myself talking around something to a team member. Basically, like somehow I'm not as dialed into the request as I need to be. And I've learned this more and more over time, and now it's come into focus for me, and it's just amazing how much it speeds everything up. So I wanted to be sure to share it with you guys. If you start thinking before you have a meeting, what requests do I have in this meeting? Get clear about what that is. What is going to be your request in this meeting? So when you're working with a team, think about specifically what your request is and make it as specific as possible and put a time limit on it. Because if you can say that, it's so much better to say to someone, I am requesting that by X date, I have these 3 reports in my hands with these things highlighted on the reports. And always ask for verbal commitment. You in? Yes. Okay, great. And so then you can even also request that they calendar the date and what's due and all of that, right? Like you can make as many requests as you want. But instead of explaining, hey, this is what I'm thinking, I'd like to see more of this and I'd like to see more of this, and giving them a bunch of behind the scenes stuff, like what was happening in your head, they don't need all of that. Truthfully, what they need is to understand what you are ultimately working for. When I say you, I mean the firm. What the firm's next level is, that the goal that has been set, what is that? Because then they can trust that every request that is made is in an effort to get it, to bridge the gap from here to there. That's it. And you can even say that up front. Like if you want to have a meeting with your team and say, listen, this is where we're going. This is the future of this firm, and this is where we're headed. Here's the next milestone, so to speak. And I would really appreciate your contribution and your enthusiasm towards getting us there. This is why it's going to be so much better when we're there, right? Get their buy-in on the goal. Then tell them, listen, I'm going to be making requests that I know will be a good next step in order to help us bridge the gap. So I want you to know that any request I make is in this effort. It's to bridge the gap from here to here. If they know that up front, then every time you make a request, it doesn't have to seem cold. It doesn't have to seem like, why aren't they giving me more information? They can trust that the why behind it is because it will contribute to this larger goal, right? So making requests speeds everything up because it gets people to work without the extra conversation around all of it. It's more just you're essentially sparking a series of actions, and action is what is going to be required to get to where you want to go. And sometimes it's not clear exactly what action you need, but it will become clear. You just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and making requests can help get people around you to help you take action to where you want to go. So requests are a big thing. And I don't think that there is a perfect way to make a request other than it needs to be very specific, and there needs to be a time limit on it, a date when it's expected to be completed, whatever the ask is. If you've got that down, then, and you are able to articulate that, and you get verbal commitment from whoever you're making the request of, then you know that ball is going to be rolling. There doesn't need to be a lot of other talk around it. I find that sometimes it helps to get your team's input on things. I'm certainly not discounting that, but there needs to be a space for that, a meeting for that, not just generally speaking throughout the workdays. So if you do want your team's input, schedule a meeting for it. And then there's going to be a series of requests that probably come out of that meeting based on what you guys decide, but it's your job to make the requests. And if you are larger and you have an integrator, let's say, then maybe they're the ones to make the request, but the requests have to be made pretty quickly. And you don't want to have a lot of conversation around things without requests being made, because that means that action isn't being taken in the way that it could be taken. So I want to offer that to you in whatever way it makes sense to you. Make requests. Get to the point. What do you want and when do you want it by? And what are the conditions by which this needs to be fulfilled? As leaders and as owners and as people who are driving things towards this future that you haven't created yet, but you are working towards, it is your job to speak with clarity, and requests help you cut through to be able to do that. So make requests as often as possible. The second piece is making promises. One way of making a promise can look something like, if fill in the blank, then fill in the blank. And I find this most useful with my team if there's something that isn't working. We had some instances last year where I had to have conversations with someone specifically because things just weren't lining up, and the expectations weren't being met. Even when I was trying to be really clear, they weren't being met. And so finally I had to get to the point where it was like, if this specific thing isn't improved in 30 days and it isn't up to this, this marker basically, then I'm going to let you go. That had to be what it was. And that helped provide so much clarity. And then there's no surprises. There's no nothing, right? So you just have to make sure that you are being clear, and promises is another way to do that. So you're making requests, and then you're making promises. Now, I just gave a promise of a tough situation, right? Like inside your firm, you may be having something similar to that, or you probably have in the past. If you haven't, you may in the future, very likely. So you can use promises to make it very clear what the consequences are if this thing isn't happening. Like, you have to make a promise and you have to fulfill the promise. But I also like thinking of promises as something that are inspiring to at least myself. I have basically a sheet of declarations that I look at every morning that remind me, they're promises to myself. And those reminders every morning that I start my day reminding myself of the promises I've made, those help me stay on track so much faster. I stay on track in a way that delivers me so much faster to where it is that I want to go. And the more I talk to owners that spend a small portion every morning reminding themselves of all the things that are so important, like high level beliefs and thoughts that can really be washed away by the day to day, but they start every day fresh with these promises that they have to themselves, and promises that they're making starting every day has been really remarkably effective in helping make progress. So I want to ask you, how do you think in your world that between here and whatever you're aiming for, how can you streamline things with making requests, lots of requests, and making promises and keeping those things alive, keeping the conversation of the journey and the goal that you're working towards. You keep that very, very alive because of the requests that you're making, which requests, they just spur a bunch of action. Every time you make a request, it should be action is taken because of the request, right? So there's lots of action that you put into existence because of the requests. And promises, for me, they're more of the guiding declarations that I have said that I'm not going to waver from. That's what I think of as promises. And sometimes that means you can use promises with your team. And actually, let me finish that thought. You can use it with your team in hard conversations, but actually you can use them for incentives, right? If we hit our goal by October 2021, then we are going on a trip or, whatever it is, but make promises and it puts everything in motion so much faster. It gets buy-in from people. People take action faster. People get engaged faster. It gets people off their duff, including yourself. So when you think about even the person, if you're having a difficult conversation about what might need to happen, if they don't get themselves to this level, like this, maybe they're missing things and things are falling through the cracks. If you have specific things like these things need to be taken care of by X date, and if they aren't, I'm going to let you go. Then that is immensely helpful to light a fire under someone. And maybe it's just what they needed. Now, if you know that it's not going to work out anyway, then, maybe you just decide that there doesn't need to be a longer game promise. I don't know what position you're in at the moment, but you can think of promises and requests as things that just get things moving faster. When you look at a business owner who doesn't make many requests and they don't make many promises either, like their mind just isn't geared towards that, you see them spinning a lot more than someone who is making requests and making promises. I had someone recently was like, well, that just seems like not a very fun boss or a leader. I'm like, it could be totally fun. You can decide. You don't have to be cold with your requests and your promises. They can be super warm. But the thing about requests and promises is how clear they are and the action that they incite. That is the beauty of it. So I want you to take stock and think about for yourself, how can you gear yourself to make more requests and more promises? How can you think about the conversations need to exist in requests and promises? What if you just thought of it like that? A conversation towards the goal is made up of requests and promises. Now, there's going to be some conversation in between there that isn't a request and isn't a promise. But when you do think of things in that way, you will be amazed at how often you see that there's an opportunity to make a request that you aren't taking. You're just talking. You're using language that represents what you're talking about or what you're wanting to create, but it doesn't incite action about what you want to create. I want you to know that you can, if you take this and run with it in your own world and just have an awareness, don't even commit to doing something specific yet if it feels a little too obtuse. Just think of this as I'm going to go in the world and I'm going to pay attention to myself and I'm going to pay attention to the requests that I'm making and if I'm making requests and where the opportunity is for that and where the opportunity is for me to make promises. Because I think a lot of the things we do in business, that's kind of the intent, but it is done with less clarity and it's less to the point. And so if we look at things through the lens of it either needs to be a request or a promise, all of a sudden it gets to the point faster. People can get on board easier. People are very clear about what's needed and people are very clear about what the deal is, right? That's more the promises. And then they can go. They can really fly. There's a lot of opportunity for it. I know that for sure. Run with that. I hope it's helpful. Yeah, use that as your a bit of a mid Q2 booster for yourself, is just starting to look at this and how can you tighten up how you are bringing conversation towards the goal to everyone around you. How are you keeping the goal alive through conversation? And the more you make requests and promises, the faster you'll fly towards the goal and the result. One last note I'll say on the request side and promises side, you can also think about this because I always push law firm owners to think of themselves as the human working towards this goal, not just a law firm owner. And so there are going to be requests that are made internally within your business And there may be requests made outside of business that will help support you staying whole and intact as you grow the firm in the ways that you want to grow the firm. It's so easy to grow at the cost of you, and that's not what we're doing here. That's not what I do with anyone that comes to me. It is important that you stay whole. And so what in your personal life, what kind of support and can you achieve through requests and promises outside of work that will help you stay whole as you move towards your goal? So I love thinking about requests and promises generally in life, not just in business, but it does help streamline things in business. And that's why I'm bringing it up here on the podcast. It streamlines things and everything speeds up when you make requests and promises. So don't forget about your personal life. There's probably plenty of requests and promises that you can make there, and that will allow you to move forward. And the final thing I'll say is that your job when you make a request is not to convince, it's not to persuade, it's not to try to drag somebody into something and do something you don't want to do. No. You have to understand that a request is a form of you keeping conversation alive in a way that incites action. And if the person doesn't accept the request, if they don't buy in and say yes to the request, then you move on and you ask somebody else. And then you move on and you ask somebody else. And maybe you change the request a little bit with the original person, but just look at it as every no is one step closer to getting that action done, because it's good to know up front, right? Otherwise, you would have not made a specific request, but you would have wanted this thing done. So you would have handed them bits and pieces, and it probably would have been a little less clear, and they wouldn't have been as engaged with it. And like, who has time for that? So when you get really clear and you make a request and someone doesn't take you up on there, because it's basically an offer. Every time you make a request, it's kind of like thinking you're making them an offer to actually take you up. They're going to take you up on this request. So if someone says no, or their attitude sucks or whatever, all right, yeah, move on. Next, like who else can you make the request of? Or is there a way to change the request that feels really good to you and to them as well? But just know that a no means you're one step closer to finding the yes that will take the action that will go and will run with things. So it's not about getting a yes. And the less emotional you can be about whether it's a yes or a no, the better. It just keeps you on track. There's not really room for emotion in all of this. I didn't mention that at the beginning, but it's an important point to say. So you're a business owner. You go on facts, not feelings. You make requests and promises. And when someone doesn't take you up on the request, next, or change, shift, learn from it. But don't, if you start to feel yourself emotional or frustrated because they didn't say yes, then I want to invite you to look at that as an opportunity to speed up the effort and the action, because you got a really clear no. You made a clear request. You got a clear no. All right. Next, figure it out, right? Figure out what works and what makes the most sense. Requests and promises. Think in those terms. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll see you here next Tuesday. Hey there. If you enjoyed this podcast, I highly recommend you come and check out Mastery Group. It is where owner attorneys come together to study this material, apply it, and thus create really big results for their firm and for their life. So come on over, velocitywork.com/join to get more information and get started. Show notes from this episode can be found at velocitywork.com/podcast.